Guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Unleash Your Inner Greatness. And I am so excited to introduce you to this week's guest. Philip McKernan is an Irish author, filmmaker, and international keynote speaker who has most recently authored a new book called One Last Talk, Why Your Truth Matters and How to Speak It, and has also been featured in a film called Give and Grow. And he's really inspiring people around the world to live a regret-free life. I first heard Philip on London Real with Brian Rose, and there was one thing that he said which was so inspiring, which we'll talk about later on in the show, and I thought I have to get him on. So I am absolutely privileged and honored to introduce you to Philip McKernan. Philip, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's absolutely awesome having you on. So I wanted to ground you in a positive place to start with all my guests, and just really dig into what you're most grateful for in your life right now, and what's been the highlight of this year for you?
The gratitude I would have is actually, might sound very self-serving, but it's actually for the courage that I've managed to tap into to continue to move towards the things that I intuitively feel are aligned to who I am. It's a lot easier in this world often to curl up in a ball and be something you're not, or stay somewhere where you're not fully aligned. And for me, putting myself out there in the world and continuing to push myself has been the thing that I'm most grateful for overall. And then the highlight of this year, you know, there's been so many. I'm privileged in that regard. I think for me is hosting 50 plus people at different retreats in Ireland, on the West Coast in the country I love, bringing them through a very deep, unapologetic journey into themselves and therefore out of themselves into the world.
Wow, I saw some footage of the event near that. There was some big greenery, cliffs. It was has travel been a significant part of your life? I think we spoke that Australia's been close to your heart as well. I think you've traveled up the east coast of Australia.
I've been very fortunate. Again, I've traveled to 85 plus countries around the world extensively. I've been traveling from a very, straight out of school. I didn't go to college, couldn't go to college because I failed everything. So I basically went on the road traveling as much as I could. And one of the places I stopped in was Australia, that small little island off New Zealand, and traveled all over Australia, made wine in Australia, worked in a bottle shop in Australia, drove through Australia, caused a lot of trouble in Australia, and met a lot of great people, and had a great time there.
What I loved reading about your bio as well, Philip, is just how like you've challenged yourself to do so many things. I read that you were caddy for the president of Ireland as well. Like you've done so many different things. So I'm really interested to learn more about all that. But it's cool. We share a commonality. Travel is something that I'm not up to 80 countries yet. I think I'm 55, but I'm sure you'd agree, travel really hones in on that element of gratitude. It really helps you be grateful for your life.
Yeah, I think it creates perspective, and I think it stretches you in ways that you're consciously aware of and unconsciously aware of, perhaps later in the journey. But I think that, travel for me, I think sometimes you need to let go of everything around you to understand, and let go of the things that you know in order to understand and to begin to discover who you really are. And I think I get that people stay in the small town or the big city that they were born in, they stay there for their entire lives. I'm not judging those people, but sometimes we need to let go of those things and move away from the people that we love and the people that are close to us that see us in a very one-dimensional capacity in order to reinvent. And I feel that travel gives us that opportunity if we allow it. But it's the way in which you travel. Like I've been to India a few times. People either love or hate India. There's this polar kind of, polarizing effect India has on you. I think it's how you travel is the difference. It's the attitude. It's the the letting go. I think we're preparing too much in life right now. We're going in on drones before we decide to go on a trip. A lot of my trips are very adventurous, with no agenda. a little bit of a framework, and I bring clients. I brought clients to India, Guatemala, Peru, and there's a little bit of a framework, but the rest of it is letting it go. And for the control freaks out there, that drives them completely nuts initially. And then after day 3, they're going, holy shit, this is so cool, because my entire life is controlled. And to be able to be in the mountains in Peru and not know what's next is actually an incredibly cathartic, therapeutic experience in its own right. So I think sometimes we over prepare too much for travel in this world.
That's awesome. Is that why you add an element of sort of travel and adventure as part of your personal development events or your business, mindset events?
Yeah, somebody said to me one day, she said, how do you pick these locations? Because I really put a lot of intentionality into where we go. And I just leaned forward and I said, it's quite complex and it's quite scientific. And she said, yeah, I bet it is. And I said, here's the deal. I pick places I want to go. I invite people I want to hang out with. And I do things that I want to do when I'm there. And she looked at me with a combination of sheer admiration and complete and utter pissed off, because she was so annoyed of my arrogance, or what she perceived as my arrogance. But the truth is that when you bring people, so if you've got any coaches or people who run retreats or whatever, when you bring people to the place that lights you up, you can't help but illuminate other people around you, because they get the best of who you are. People have said to me so many times, I've experienced your work in North America, I've experienced you in Peru and whatever, but when I see you in Ireland at Brave Soul, which is the week I run, when I see you there, it's a different, completely different level, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. And therefore they benefit from that experience because I'm at my best. And I don't mean that it's all about me. It's about me creating an environment to capture and to allow what is already inside a human being to emerge. That's what I do, and I do it very, very well. But I need to go to places that allow me to do that at my best.
Yeah. And it energetically something shifts, so it's really powerful. I was going to say,
can I share one thing?
Please do.
This may or may not be useful. So if you have any speakers, and I think we're all speakers, we all have the capacity to stand on a stage and share a story, share a part of who we are. I mean, that's what I believe. But I always start a keynote speech with a story. And sometimes the story deeply relates to what is about to come next. And sometimes you've got to join the dots yourself. And sometimes it's got nothing to do with the topic. And people often ask me, what's the purpose of that story? Is it to get everybody emotional, to do this, do that? I go, no, that story's for me. And they're going to go, what? I said, that opening story is for me. Now, if anybody else in the audience benefits from it, wonderful. But that opening story is for me. And why I always share a story that stirs me emotionally is what it does. It gets me on stage and it immediately brings me from my head down into my soul, down into my heart, and connects me. So for the next 45 minutes or the next 90 minutes or the next 2 hours, whatever the length of the keynote is or the workshop, I'm available like I wouldn't ordinarily be available. So that opening story is for me personally, and hopefully it benefits everybody else as a result.
That's awesome. And it's like put your oxygen mask on first. It's true. I think a lot of us, if we led with pursuing our own dreams and our own ambitions, eventually we're just going to inspire people along the way as well. So I'm sure a lot of the contextual stuff that you provide at the events speaks on that as well. So for anyone who's been maybe living under a rock and who doesn't know you, Philip, you've achieved a lot of things. You've written a couple of books, you've been in a feature film, but I was wondering, would you be able to take us back to the humble beginnings and let us know how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I would, but I'd like to think that they're humble existences as well. But that, those things sound very sexy. And I don't want people to misunderstand that those things are things that I've done, but I still feel I'm the same individual in some respects than I was, when I was a dyslexic kid sitting in a classroom being ridiculed for being lazy by teachers who they themselves were just angry in the world. So I don't know where in the story you want me to begin, but I never imagined I'd be doing what I'm doing. Sometimes people think that the answer or the thing that's going to come out of my mouth is, oh, this was part of this grand vision. And by the way, I always predicted this was going to be the outcome. We're going to make our own feature film. We're going to write books. I'm going to write 20 books before I die, at least. We're going to set up a movement that's been launched all over the world called One Last Talk, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, I can teach you how to achieve this by following my 5-step or 9,000-step system. I never imagined I'd be doing what I'm doing. In fact, I tried everything in my power to make sure that I didn't and wasn't doing what I'm doing. I did not want to be the public face. I did not want to be the guy on stage. I did not want to be the guy that was being seen by the world. I wanted to get that rock that perhaps some of you referred to earlier on. I wanted to be the one lying under the rock, because anytime that I put my head above water, I felt, right or wrong, that it was slapped back down in societal terms and schooling and so on and so forth. So in many respects, I'm as surprised as anybody that I'm doing what I'm doing, deeply grateful for it, love it, pour my heart and soul into it, but it was never part of the plan. And I would say that I got here somewhat accidentally on purpose.
Yeah. You feel like you were destined to sort of, sort of pursue this? Was there ever sort of an inner calling, in a whisper that used to run through your head daily to remind you that maybe you were destined for something else?
I did an exceptional job at shutting that shit off. I would take the volume button and I would turn it right down. I would take the eject button and take that tape out or that CD out or whatever it was. I did everything in my power to move away from the very thing. If you think about it in the context of writing a book, for example, I feel that we all have an idea or in a book that perhaps will sell, but we all have a book in our heart that we need to write.
Yeah.
And what we tend to do is move with a book that'll sell because we're afraid to put the essence of who we are on the table for ridicule and potential failure. It's always been there. And I don't feel it's about me, though. I think too many people make this work about Philip McKernan. I'm just a catalyst. I'm a messenger from the universe, whatever. And the work that I do comes through me, but it's not about me, if that makes any sense.
Yep. So with ignoring that voice for so long, what was the catalyst for you to eventually say, Philip, it's time?
Pain.
Yep. I knew it would be.
Yeah, I mean, the pain had to get bad enough, number one. I didn't get as bad as it could have. I think the best thing that happened for me is I finally made the jump, not just intellectually, but emotionally, that my journey is not about Philip McKernan. And as much as my friends might disagree and my own parents might disagree, I was very selfish. I was very caught up in this bubble and it was all about me. And it was about, even when it came to impact, I'd want to make an impact, but I had to look good doing it. So it was all around Philip McKernan. And I didn't see that at the time. I wasn't conscious of that at the time. And when I started to really, really shift the dial emotionally and start to realize that actually my work, my existence, my presence in this world isn't about me. I'm here as a catalyst for other people. Then I ran the risk of failing. Then I allowed people to see all of who I was. Then I allowed people to see my successes and my dreadful failures. And I was free of the burden of trying to keep my shit together publicly, which is one of the greatest burdens. And my heart goes out to anybody in the public domain who has the burden on their shoulders of trying to pretend they have their shit together every day.
Yeah.
And I deal with a lot of people in the public domain. I deal with a lot of very successful coaches and writers and speakers, some of which initially come to me and say, I want to work with you one-to-one. I don't want to do any of this group stuff. And the reason that is, and they'll say to me, oh, but I don't work well in groups. Let me translate that into English. English is, I'm afraid that people will see that I'm human and that I've got my own shit going on. And that is, to me, is a burden and an unfortunate burden, because what happens is the energy they're expelling to try and pretend everything's okay, that energy could actually be focused in helping humanity and pushing humanity forward and leaving this world in a better place than they found it. So, yeah, I mean, it's been an extraordinary journey, but as I say, it's less about me and it's more about how I can show up and deliver a space for people to really lean and grow. And I believe the greatest gifts that we have lie right next to our deepest wounds. And a lot of us are not prepared to look at those wounds and therefore uncover our gifts. And most of us walk through this earth executing our talent, but never, ever honoring our gift. And that to me is a tragedy.
Phil, I have to say this because it's just like I was thinking about it before. When you speak, it's almost poetic. It's amazing. I could tweet certain versions of all these talks. It's amazing. Just some of the things, and I'll tell you the verse that actually was why I wanted to get you on the show. And I may say it incorrectly, but you'll probably say it correctly. But when you said this on London Real, I was blown away. You said, what you don't bring forth within you will be the thing that eventually destroys you. It was something similar along that.
Mm.
So I would absolutely love to help the listeners, if we focus on the listeners, if they feel that they have something within them, if they have that inner voice that it tells them that you are destined to do something more with your life than what you're doing, but they've been putting it off because of fear, or probably because of fear. How do they either tune the pain up so they eventually take the leap, or how do they take that leap? What is there a method that perhaps you can inspire them or walk them through to get ready to take the leap?
I'm going to do something kind of unusual here. Let me just check something. I don't think I've ever done this on an interview in my life before, where I'm actually going to go to my email and find a little thing that if I can just find. Okay, so I have it here. And this is I just found it. Okay, so this is very interesting. And it's the first time I've shared this, but I'm going to do this because I got this message. And now contextualize, just understand that I'm getting on a plane in Ireland, and I'm flying to northern France to go to Normandy to bring my family to where the Allies landed, and just, experience that whole thing to see, what emerges. And I post a photograph of a D-Day book that I'm flicking through and whatever. And I go on the way to France, to Normandy, whatever. And then I get this message. And the message is, the issue I have right now is that I feel like what I have to share isn't valuable. I mean, mindfulness literally changed my life, and I know I have it within me to help others. It's just, I feel others won't value what I have to say. Even when I'm talking and I don't get immediate feedback, I shy away. There's also this other thought that others are already speaking the truth for me, so why bother? Now, why am I sharing this with you? I'm sharing this with you because it speaks directly to the question you asked. And this is the type of outreach that I get from people. Number one is, this man is downloading his stuff on a post that is completely irrelevant. Okay, this is a personal post. And then he comes in and goes, the issue I have is. But what I really want to point out is, he mentions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and he mentions me 12, 13 times in a body of text that is no more than this length if you're looking at the video of this. And this is very typical of what I'm witnessing in the world, and very typical of where I was in the world. What he doesn't realize is he's making it all about him. When we ask people to do their one last talks, the biggest challenge is, how do I deliver a value and look good doing it? I think if you're caught in looking good doing it, that's paranoia, that's scarcity, that's fear, that's your brain. If you can let go of that, and you might feel embarrassed, you might feel slightly ashamed, but the world gets to see all of you, and therefore it begins and has the opportunity to accept all of you. But if you delve in a little bit further, the issue I have right now is that I feel like what I have to share isn't valuable. What he's really saying there, but he may not even agree with me, is he doesn't have value in the world. He doesn't feel of value in the world. And therefore, anything that comes out of his mouth is never going to feel valued. He's not going deep enough in the narrative. He's not going deep enough within himself. If we continue on, this mindfulness changed my life, and I know I have it within me to help others. So he knows there's a calling. He knows, he feels that voice. I just feel like others won't value what I have to say. That's the point. He is so concerned about what other people think of him and feel about him that he hasn't done that deeper interior work of self-acceptance and self-love, which I would have thought was corny and bullshit 10 years ago. To me, it's the most valuable work you do, because if you love yourself, if you have self-respect, if you believe in yourself, it's a bonus if somebody else does, but you don't need anyone else to believe in you in order to move forward. And then the final piece is, even when I'm talking, I don't get immediate feedback, I shy away. In other words, when he's speaking on stage or speaking at a workshop, if he doesn't get immediate audience feedback, he shies away. So it's all about winning over the audience. That's all it's about. And the final piece is, And then there's that other thought that people are already speaking my truth. So if one of your audience members wants to make an impact in the world using meditation, using MDMA, using hiking, using inspiration, and they hear that somebody else in the world is doing that, and they're using that as one of the reasons for not stepping out into the world, I'm here to say one thing and one thing only. You're effing selfish, because it's all about you. What I'd love you to think about, and here's an exercise for everybody who's shying away from their gift. You ready for this? Is this okay?
Yeah.
So I want you to do an exercise. I want you to take a blank piece of paper, and I want you to draw not a single word. You're not allowed to write one word, one letter, one number. It's just a drawing. I'd like you to draw the person that if you showed up fully in the world, if you allowed yourself to speak your truth, who could you affect? It could be a young 5-year-old girl. It could be a 19-year-old man. It could be a grandfather. It could be whoever. It could be an entrepreneur who's struggling with work-life balance. It could be somebody who's semi-depressed because you were there before and you know what that feels like. I'd like you to draw a picture of the person that if you spoke your truth and you had the courage to stand on stage, write a book, do a post, and amplify what you believe into the world, who's that person? I want you to name that person. I want you to describe. I want you to draw. I want you to put a hat on them. Gray hair, white hair, no hair. I don't give a shit. I want you to draw. I want you to feel how you could impact them and how you could make them feel alive. In other words, I'm asking you to identify an avatar, but emotionally, not intellectually, business-wise, and to describe in a drawing who's the person that you could impact the most. I want you to feel the impact that you can make in them. Because what I'm doing there in that little exercise is getting you out of your own way, getting you out of your own head, and then name the person. So let's just say you finish with the drawing of a 50-year-old woman. Her name is Peggy. She's in a shitty job that she hates. You know what that feels like because you were there before. You've made a transition and you want to help the Peggys of the world. And you draw this picture, Peggy, and here's what it comes down to. Are you going to deprive Peggy of the opportunity to hear your voice to inspire her? Or are you going to get out there and stop making the journey about you? That's your choice. And when you get that, you won't hide under a rock. You won't hide under a fucking M&M. You won't hide under anything. You will put yourself out there because it's not about you. It's about Peggy. And I'm not talking about a business avatar. Don't make this an intellectual exercise because it's not. This is the problem. We have a lot of intellectual awareness around this stuff, but emotionally we haven't caught up. You've got to understand the emotional cost if you choose to deprive the world of the greatest gift that you've been given, which, by the way, lies right next often to the greatest pain that you've experienced, which is part of the reason why none of us discover our purpose or our passion, because the least place we want to look, the very place we definitely don't want to look is behind the door where all the greatest shit that we're trying to pretend didn't happen lies.
Oh, it's so powerful. The catalyst for me starting the podcast was my divorce. And it's interesting because, and it's funny, you mentioned self-love. It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm a 36-year-old man. After my divorce, I went into a deep state of depression and ultimately had suicidal thoughts at one stage. And I never wanted anyone else to feel that way or to go through that. So a lot of the podcast is about individuals who have inspired me to step into my greatness. And it's a journey. I'm still continuing that. But you mentioned self-love, and I'm actually rereading a book called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay.
Yep.
Don't know if you've ever read that.
I know others. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's a great book, and there's different methods in which you can fortify your own self-love, affirmations, mirror work, etc. I just wanted to step into that conversation if I could, because a lot of successful entrepreneurs miss this, but it's so fundamental, the whole self-esteem and self-love, you can call it. Would you be open to talking a little bit about it, to step into it a bit? Maybe if someone
100%.
if someone is struggling with that, is there any strategies or tips that you could help people with, given that you said that's something you've worked on yourself?
I think the biggest thing before we go to fix anything or solve anything,
but
is to understand its existence to begin with. So
Yeah.
when I went to therapy for the first time, I didn't need therapy. I was way too cool for therapy. I was going purely out of curiosity and to see, you know, what it was like. I get to a room, there's two chairs, one with the biggest box of Kleenex you can imagine. And I sat in the opposite chair, and the guy walks in and goes, "You're in the wrong chair." And it was a Jerry Maguire moment, if you ever seen the movie. And I sat there, looked at the Kleenex and said, "You ain't going to make me cry, buddy," internally. I'd say within about 2.5 minutes, I was bawling my eyes out. I was angry. I was vibrating with judgment. I just was stunned about how much unresolved emotion that was swirling around in my body. And what I also realized is the disdain in which I really, truly held myself behind the scenes. And a lot of people use that to drive themselves to achieve success on paper, in societal terms. And then what they have is they're afraid to work on that stuff because they have the data to prove that they're driven, this harsh driven, even if it means that they don't look after themselves, and there's detrimental results in their personal lives, and maybe there's fallouts with relationships, breakups, whatever. But they have success on the ice. They're not successful off the ice, but on the ice, meaning business, they're successful. They're afraid to look at that self-love because they feel that if they soften around the edges, they will lose their drive. Their drive will diminish. Bullshit. My experience is the drive amplifies. It just becomes more focused. The drive amplifies. It just becomes a little bit more integrated into who you are. The drive does not go away. The drive amplifies into a place of more meaning. And that is the very time that you'll probably make the greatest impact in the world. So when we go to school, and we spent 18 years, 16 years, I don't know. To me, it was just the whole thing was a goddamn prison sentence. And when we go through school, no school in the world that I'm aware of, no corridor, no classroom had a sign on the wall saying, "Come in here and get to know who you are. Come in here to get to understand who you are," because the society and the school and the system was too busy telling me who I was going to be, and what I needed to do and who I needed to be in order to succeed. So the whole system is against us from a very, very early age. But to me, it's the most fundamental missing step for most people is they don't ever take the time to really consider self-love. And I'm not talking about just affirmations and looking in the mirror and repeating the same thing. I don't mean that in a condescending or derogatory way to anybody and anybody's work. I feel we need to go deeper into, if I don't love myself, why not? What are the things that I've done are the things that I didn't do, that I regret, that I hold against myself, that I have shame around, that I have to start to dissolve and accept in order for me to move forward as a better human in this world. Yeah. And that's the time when success, if you want to call it that, momentum started to come into my life. When I started to really fundamentally believe, not just was I capable, but that I deserved an opportunity into this world. And then when those two things collided, that's when the shit started to happen for me.
There was one, I went to an event, and I'm just going to flow on to what you said. There was something that you said just then. There was an event I went to, and there was a question that we had to answer around a circle. You were in the middle of the circle looking at everyone else. And the question was, what are you hiding and most ashamed of in your life? And you had to tell that to the group. It was a real turning point for absolutely every single person in that room, including myself. Yeah. And having looked back on my divorce, I understand now why it happened. Like, it happened because I had something buried at a more emotional level, which I hadn't dealt with, that was bringing up so much pain in my marriage. So it was completely destroying my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my friends, my relationship with, even at work, like struggled to keep down the job. So I'm so grateful that you touched on it. And I think, like you said, I learned something today as well. You taught me something, because I'm always asking, what are some steps or what are some strategies? But you taught me something really profound today, and it was, what's the cause of it?
I think if you get to the touch of the cause, the strategies and the solutions will present themselves. For example, I remember working with a lady, and I'll abbreviate this story to make it easier, but her biggest challenge was she wasn't making enough money executing her gift into the world. And she was a painter, and she used to paint these extraordinary paintings, and she'd present them to the world, and the world didn't want to pay her, in her mind, what she felt they were worth and all this kind of stuff. And she was looking for a strategy. She thought it was Facebook, it was Twitter, it was Facebook ads, it was some sort of marketing thing. Not to say that there's no marketing activity that she could be doing that could improve her situation. But the bottom line is that she actually despised money. And when I presented this as an idea to her, she thought it was absolutely ludicrous, like beyond ludicrous. She says, why would I come to you to help me gain momentum, to get paid financially for the thing I want to do, which is the best and greatest expression of who I am? Why would I do that if I hated money? I said, consciously, you're not aware of this. But deep down, you despise money. And on a very basic level, what we got to, and this is very simple, but it was a little bit more complex than that, but not a lot, is that when she grew up as a young child, her parents used to argue. And in her memory bank, she had basically placed the origin of the arguments and the anger was one of a monetary sense. It was a financial argument, financial pressure. And she basically put 1 and 1 together and came up with 65. And the 65 was, if I don't have money, therefore I will avoid the very thing that I didn't want to hear as a child. And she was oblivious to this. It's just I'm always curious about people come to me seeking clarity about what is seen, but actually what is unseen. They don't come to me for clarity about the things they can't see. And when we uncover that, almost every person's ever come to me for X. We go for Y, and X resolves itself. X almost never marks the spot. We think it does, but we're looking there because we're trying to keep ourselves safe. We're digging for gold in the wrong field, and we're afraid to dig in the other field because we're afraid of what might emerge. And that's the place where the real gold, where the real diamonds exist, 99.9% of the time.
I knew this conversation would be absolutely amazing. I was going to say, our parents have such an influence on us growing up. I wanted to ask, sort of on your side, who was your biggest mentor in terms of, in terms of your parents? Who had the biggest influence on your life, and what was the one thing that they taught you which you really apply in your life today?
I'll tell you a quick story about my dad. Years ago, my dad was doing a golf trip with clients, and somebody backed out, and he rang me and said, would you like to take the place? And we went up, and there was a bus driver, let's call him Billy. I have no idea what his name, I can't remember his name, but Billy was this big, enormous man who carried a lot of weight on him, and but a very jovial guy. And he drove us up on the bus, and he drove us back down to Dublin on the bus. We went up to a place called Northern Ireland where we played, a round of golf, and we came back that day. And we all sat down for dinner, all the clients were around, and my dad said, where's Billy? And everyone went, who are you talking about? My dad said, the bus driver. And somebody says, oh, he's around the corner, eating dinner on his own. And my dad said, not a chance. And my dad gets up, finds Billy, brings Billy back around the corner. There's no, because the table was set for the clients, there's no space for him. Sat Billy down on this little table, pulled his own chair across and sat with Billy. And wow. I'll never forget that as long as I live, because what my dad showed me, didn't tell me this, didn't lecture me, but showed me, is that nobody lies beneath us. Nobody lies beneath us. And inadvertently, nobody lies above us. So when I meet stars and I meet well-known people, I don't have this pedestal thing. It just doesn't exist. When clients come to work with me, they do not get an opportunity to put me on a pedestal. Okay. My ego wants it. My God, my ego yearns for it, for people to see me in a light like I'm almost godlike, and I've got this, I'm a magician, and I'm deeply gifted, and I'm very good at what I do. I know that. I don't need anyone else to tell me that. But I don't need or want anyone to put me on a pedestal, because it's not good for me, and it's certainly not good for them.
Yeah.
But respect is a different thing. So my dad taught me that, and my mother taught me every single day by the way she showed up in the world about intuition, about the power of being intuitive. Yet my mother never trusted her intuition.
Right.
She questioned it at the core. And that's a bigger, deeper story within her narrative about why. But that's the two things I remember my parents teaching me the most, now that I have an opportunity to look back.
That's awesome. And as a father, what's your current biggest challenge?
Parenting. The whole goddamn thing. My biggest challenge is, I said this, recently, and it felt a bit weird to say it, but it's the truth, is that I often have more patience with my own individual clients than I do with my own children.
Fair enough.
Honestly. And, the one thing that I do well with our kids, I don't do a lot well, but the one thing I do very well is I allow them to see all of me. I allow them to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I feel that parents protect their kids way too much and then expect perfection from them by, indirectly, inadvertently. And I feel that by allowing our kids, even playing a sport that I'm shit at, playing a game that my kids are very good at that I can't do, what it does is allows them to see not a weakness, but yeah, maybe a vulnerability in dad's right arm or his golf swing or whatever, even something as simple as that. Because I feel that as parents, we try to be way too strong for our kids. And we think we're supporting our kids, but in actual fact, we're setting them up to be strong where they don't need to be strong, or to be strong all the time. When I honestly believe sometimes we need to be weak, because we're human, and we need to allow people to help us, and we need to be able to ask for help in the world, which I'm not good at.
Yeah, I completely agree. Philip, I want to touch on life purpose, and I want to speak about your book as well, if that's okay.
Yep.
I really feel that, a lot of people question their life purpose. They want to find it. It's something that's common amongst a lot of people. Do you feel like you've truly found yours?
I didn't find it. I uncovered it.
Okay.
So when you think about find almost indicates it could be in the top of Mount Everest, or it could be behind the single bush that you guys have in Australia, next to some goddamn kangaroo or something. In other words, it's out there somewhere in the globe.
Yeah.
Uncovering it indicates energetically that it's already there within who you are, and that's my fundamental belief. Have I uncovered it? Yes. Is it constantly evolving, constantly being uncovered? Yes, also. I think people are looking for this infinite, or this moment in time where there's a period at the end of the line going, I found it, and that's it. And here's the mistake people make, is they find something. Let's just say, I always pick on the accountants because my wife's an accountant. So I'm an accountant, and I know deep down it's not what I'm meant to do. And then I get into real estate, flipping houses, and I go, oh my God, this is it. This is my purpose. And I then layer in complexities or justifications, like, oh, well, I can help people. If I make enough money, I can build an orphanage, and I can do this and I can do that. So this is my passion. And what they're doing is they're grabbing onto excitement, because flipping houses is more exciting than accounting for this particular person. And they don't just say, yeah, it's exciting and it's better, but maybe it's not my end game. Who knows? Be open. Don't get attached. Because what it could be is just simply a stepping stone. If you think about, I'm in the bank of a river. The other bank represents somewhat kind of type of a rival, a place of more fulfillment. Well, I don't want to get too attached to what I'm doing right now, because the next stepping stone won't present itself. And maybe flipping houses is just one thing. Maybe it's not the thing. And I find, and here's something I've said recently, which I absolutely believe to my core, is I'm going to hold up two cups, okay, in my hand. And let's just say this is what I'm doing right now. And I know this glass, whatever it is, accounting is not who I am. It's not representative of the essence of who I am at my core. I've got more to give this world. And then this idea pops up, which is the next thing, which is flipping houses. What I'm finding is it's not this. It's not this. What lies beyond both is the truth. And it's our attachment. We would rather hold on to something that doesn't fully serve us than run the risk of presenting ourselves, the essence of ourselves to the world, through a book, through a speech, through a job, through a business, whatever. So I feel that the best of us is beyond not just the thing we're doing, the thing that we think we should do, it's beyond both.
Okay.
And I see that all the time.
Wow. And like at your events, do you go through a certain process? Like if someone comes up to you and says, look, Philip, I really just need to I need to uncover this. It's killing my soul. I know I'm destined to do something. Can you help me maybe uncover it? Are you able to help people uncover it, or is this a self job? Like, do they have to do this themselves?
That is my entire business is I
Wow.
help people connect to themselves, to the people around them, and to meaningful work. Here's the challenge with that individual you just described. I need to find this. It's killing my soul. Think about the energy behind that. So there's a level of, people could say, commitment and dedication. To me, there's a level of desperation. What I need to do is work on that person. Is the first thing I'll say is, why is it such a big deal? Why is it killing your soul? Why is it so significant? Think about this. Let's use an analogy with the same energy, and let's just see how it works out for you. Okay, not you personally, but anyone listening to this or watching this in the future. Let's turn that into a relationship and a date. Turn exactly what you presented here into a date. I need a woman. I need a man. It's killing my soul. So great. So we send that person to a bar in Melbourne, where you're from. And that person sits there with that desperation on their shoulders at the bar. And they're either drooling or they're hot or sweating, whatever, because they're staring at the door because they need somebody. They need somebody. And their need is driven by scarcity. Their need is driven by the fact that they feel they need someone in their life to make them complete. That is a fundamental, disastrous, energetic place to begin with, because here's what's going to happen. If you need someone to make you happy in this world, what you're going to do is you're going to find somebody. That's what we do. We're going to solve it. But what will happen is we'll find Mr. Right or Mrs. Wonderful. And what we'll do is we'll ignore some of the red flags on the peripheral because we're so attached to the outcome. And in 5 years or 10 years, that explodes or implodes in a relationship context.
Yeah.
So the most exciting, the most attractive person in the bar is not the person that's drooling, staring at the door, waiting for somebody to come in the door, nor is it the person that's ignoring the door with the one big finger pointing at the door going, F you world. I don't want a woman or a man in my relationship, in my life. I hate women. I hate men. I've been hurt, and therefore I'm never going to have another man or woman in my life. It's the person sitting there sipping their gin and tonic that is not desperate, nor are they pushing people away. They're open, but they don't need you in their life to make them happy. But your existence would enhance their journey in this world. That is the most attractive person in a bar, in a boardroom, and in a bedroom, period. If we could take the same energy and apply that to our purpose and trust, because it all comes down to trust.
Yeah.
We talked about self-love and self-esteem. We touched on that. How many of your audience listening to this in their car right now, watching this on YouTube or whatever medium that you present this on, can truly hit pause right now and answer the following question? Do you unconditionally trust yourself? I know you might want to. I know your intellectual answer, of course, but do you really trust yourself? If the answer is sometimes, if the answer is no, then why would you trust your intuition? Why would you trust the essence of who you are? Because you don't trust yourself. So it's the energy, anything you chase, with the exception of a goddamn lion or massive bull elephant, which chase me, but most things you chase in life run away from you. It's the same with passion. It's the same with purpose. People are chasing it. They're obsessing with it. And they're reading articles and books and Facebook posts from people who have claimed to found it. And in many cases, they're goddamn miserable, and they're trying to model their lives on people that are saying publicly they found their purpose and their passion, their love, everything's presented on Facebook as perfection. And that's their heroes, and that's the people they're trying to emulate.
Yeah. Oh, wow. The one thing that come to my mind thank you, by the way, I really appreciate what you just delivered. I really, really appreciate it. It was so powerful. And one thing that I was thinking is, and this just going back to how you made me think today, what's the root cause of, is it scarcity or is it fear or is it something else? You know,
we're scarce for a reason.
Yeah.
Think about a little baby. A little baby that is born in a hospital right now, this second, pops out and hopefully is coming into the world in a safe environment to a man, a woman, of parents, husband, wife, whatever, that want to love and cherish them. And that baby, someone is staring at that baby right now. Do you think that baby has scarcity in its soul? Do you think that
Absolutely.
baby is riddled with fear right now? Do you think that baby is, excuse my ignorance here for a moment, is an asshole? In other words, we all know difficult people in the world, but were they born like that, or did they become that way? Why are people defensive? Why are people arrogant? Why are people rude? They've become that way because at some point in their lives it served them to pivot who they are, the essence of who they are, to survive, to fit in, to be accepted, or to be ostracized, because that can also serve them in a way. We're not born with scarcity. Scarcity is a byproduct of something else. I think scarcity, and I think fear, is a pussycat. It is a pussycat. It is not as big a deal as we've all made it out to be. And I think the problem with fear is we're trying to eradicate fear. And yet fear is not our enemy. Fear could be our friend. And the amount of energy we're trying to expel running from fear, and yet fear doesn't need Red Bull. It doesn't need, energy drinks. It doesn't need rest. It doesn't need sleep. And you turn around at the ripe old age of 55, you look back and the fucker's still behind you. Fear's never going to leave you if you continue to try to dominate it, kill it, crush it, whatever you want to call it. What is the fear telling you? Maybe it's there to tip you on the shoulder and inform you. So I encourage people to turn around into the fear and to really begin to integrate and understand it, so it loosens its grip and it doesn't determine and dictate the energy of your life.
I was going to ask, Philip, what are you most fearful of at the moment?
One of the ongoing fears that I face, concerns that I face, is losing myself in this work. And this might come across, this is where we maybe go into what some might deem an unprofessional place. And quite frankly, I really don't care, because this is my truth. Is when I set out in pursuit of whatever was there that I couldn't see, when I just opened myself out into the world, when I started to let go and experiment and try new things and leave Ireland, which was massive for me, I'd go to the odd event, live event, and I'd see speakers that as embarrassed as I am to say this right now, to some extent, I would look at these speakers and go, oh my God, that's the dream. Oh my, can you imagine being like him? Can you imagine being as powerful a speaker as that person up there? Can you imagine being in the green room with these people? Looking around the room, can you imagine speaking in front of 5,000 people? And the fear that was invoked when I think about that, and the energy and excitement that was invoked at the same time, that dual energetic pull. And after a period of time, I didn't just suddenly find myself in that green room on that stage next to that person. But over time, it happened. But the truth is that almost every single speaker I've ever met, not all, almost, like 95% of them, they share one thing on stage and they live a completely different life.
Wow.
I'm not exaggerating with my numbers. Now, they may say the same about me, and that's entirely up to them, entirely up to your audience to perceive energetically, intuitively, whether what I'm saying makes sense or whether it lands for them intuitively or not, or they think I'm an asshole. That's entirely up to them. But how many of these speakers are sharing one thing on stage or hiding parts of their lives from the public because they don't want the public to know that they've got a talent? They're posting the sexiest stuff on Facebook as it's known, and they're showing and presenting this persona into the world because they need to be perfect in their mind, right or wrong, to be able to hold that public status. Now, to me, it's exhausting. But here's the thing. Do they all set out like that? No. Many of these speakers set out with great intentions. And every day they just slipped a little bit, slipped a little bit, slipped a little bit, slipped a bit. And then the darkness, they start to go into this slightly darker realm, if you want to call it that. Not bad, nasty stuff. They just went off course. And to me, that I've studied that intently. And people say to me all the time, oh, that's never going to happen to you. The minute I let go of the possibility of that arising in my life, I move from a place of awareness to complacency. So it's a constant in my life. And I don't mean constant in every minute of every day. But how do I keep on track? How do I stay true to who I am? Call it authenticity, call it truth, whatever you want to call it. How do I do that organically? And how do I do that consciously? Because my greatest fear is I become the same way. I set out with a great intention, but over a period of time, and I know exactly why it happens, by the way. I've got two hands straight here. And as you start getting pushed up onto a pedestal, okay, you allow people to do it and they push you up and you allow it to happen. When you get pushed up to the top of that pyramid, when you're shoulder to shoulder with every other human being, you're the same. Billy, the bus driver, my dad and myself, we're all the same. But when you get pushed up, when you get into the public domain, whether you're a writer, a film star, whatever it happens to be, people are obsessed with pushing you up onto a pedestal. When you get to the top of that pyramid, you look to your right and look to your left. There's no one else around. The fall is significant and there's only one way down. And you start to believe your own hype when you're up there. And I see it happening all the time. And who picks up the pieces from a lot of these very successful people who finally have got to the top of the pyramid and are goddamn lonely and realize they climbed the wrong mountain? Me. So I have people who want to be successful, and I'm coaching tons of people who are hugely successful, but don't have meaning and connection and connectivity, not through social media, but through relationships in their lives. They come to me.
Would you agree that a lot of these speakers are naturally introvert as well? Or some are, some aren't? Like, what's the percentage ratio that you would find based on the speakers that you know?
I think the introverts are probably a little bit less disingenuous. I think some of the extroverts are, the more someone tries to convince you of something, the more insecure they are around that thing, is my experience.
Okay.
It's like religion. The more someone is trying to push religion on you, it's actually they're afraid of actually addressing their own insecurity about that religion. So rather than address that, they actually just go out there and try to amplify their religious beliefs in everybody else. And I don't really get into the conversation about introvert, extrovert. It doesn't connect with me because I've met way too many people that cite themselves as an introvert.
Sure.
And I have absolutely proved that they're an extrovert pretending to be an introvert.
Yep. In terms of books, your one, could you tell the listeners, and we'll put it in the show notes as well, so we can share that out because it's an important message to the world. But can you give us a synopsis? Just give us a 30-second, 45-second synopsis of what someone can expect from the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to go deep. It's a no bullshit, unapologetic dive into who you are, the essence of who you are, your truth rather than your story, and an invitation to deliver that story, that truth to at least one other human being in the world, to set your truth free, to set other people's truth free, to ultimately create a degree of healing in your life and other people's lives, which in return creates connection, and in turn prevents the possibility of isolation and therefore loneliness, which is the greatest pandemic in the world. And it's called One Last Talk.
Amazing. And it will be linked and shared with the audience. So I really appreciate that. I have 4 last questions for you.
And by the way, if I may,
of course, go for it.
And hopefully this comes across as being respectful. I want people to get involved in One Last Talk. I want people to step up and take it in their city and deliver it. I want them to bring it into their organization because it's not about me. It's the one thing I refuse and will never sign a copy of the One Last Talk book. It is the most powerful method, I believe, to create healing. And it's not about me. It's about the brave men and women who have given their One Last Talks and who are going to give their One Last Talks around the world. So we're putting it out there unapologetically and saying, we want to grow this and we need people to help do so. It's a movement.
Yeah, and that's why I got you on the show, to be honest, because, I mean, if I define my purpose, it's kind of live a happy, purposeful, regret-free life. That's how I've structured that in a sort of title way. But I think living a regret-free life is so important, and that's why I'm passionate about sharing the book and the message. Now, I've got 4 last questions for you.
Cool.
3 will be rapid fire, but one is, the first one is, I'd love to know what's your legacy to the world and how would you love to be remembered, Philip McKernan?
I don't believe in leaving a legacy. I believe in living one. And my legacy is unfolding every single day. It's not about leaving anything in the future. It's about living a legacy, not leaving one.
Awesome. Leaving a legacy, not leaving one. Appreciate it. Now, are you ready for the 3 rapid fire questions?
Let's go.
Awesome. So the first one is, what's one thing that people can do to live a happier life?
Oh, gee, I thought they were going to be quick. Holy crap. Honestly, and this might sound again self-serving, it's not my intention, is do their one last talk and deliver it to at least one other human being, and benefit in the cathartic, therapeutic nature of letting that truth and that story out to the world. It is proved time and time to be hugely successful.
Good man. So deliver their one last talk. And second one is, what's one thing that people can do to live a more purposeful life?
Stop chasing their purpose and allow it to come to them, and trust that they already have it inside. It's not behind some bush or under some tree or behind some rock. It's already inside of them. And if they can trust that, they have a greater chance of becoming more aligned in their lives. And experiment like hell. Take chances, experiment. Don't wait for clarity. In the absence of clarity, take action.
In the absence of clarity, take action. Okay. And the last one is, second last one, what's one thing that people can do to live a regret-free life?
Forgive themselves for the regrets they currently harbor and hold into their life, rather than worrying about the future, and trust that if they continue to do that, say sorry, ask for help, go first. Don't wait for the other person to, after 20 years, to ring you and say, hey, sorry for being an asshole. Maybe you could go first. Forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts you can give to somebody else. Forgiveness, ironically, is the greatest gift you can give to yourself.
Yeah.
So forgive, and forgive again.
Totally agree. Last question is this. Philip, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been an incredible interview, and just from my side, it's one of the best interviews I've ever done. I definitely know that people are going to be inspired to not only rewatch the interview, but take thought on some of the things that you've invoked in the conversation. So I've really loved it. My final question is this. Imagine that it's your last day and that I handed you a piece of paper and a pen. On this piece of paper, you have one opportunity to write down a piece of advice to inspire future generations to believe in their inner greatness. What's the one piece of advice that you would write on that piece of paper?
So I get, 20 minutes for this answer? Wow. I've never been asked anything like that before. I would write something along the lines of, focus less on finding the things in life that you love, and do the work you need to fall in love with yourself.
Philip, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I want to acknowledge you and thank you for your courage to follow your heart and to follow the work that you were destined to do in this world. This is the first time I've spoken to you, but I feel really aligned with what you do. So from my point of view, I really hope that I'm able to help you share the message of inspiring other people to deliver their one last talk. I just wanted to end this by turning the conversation over to you. And is there anything, any last parting words that you would love to tell the listeners on today's show?
Actually. Yeah, there is, and it's about you. I get interviewed quite a lot, and often I get interviewed by people who, basically anything you say, then they just build on top and they go, yeah, no, I did that back in '72. I did that, and the interview's about them, and then I get other people who put you on a pedestal, and it's just everything you say is overwhelming to them. And then in the middle, you get these very inspirational people such as yourself, who ask great questions, who are very considerate, very intentional, but have the courage to express their own vulnerabilities in an interview. And if I was listening, if I'm part of your community, your extended listenership, I would be very privileged, and that's why I would follow you, because it's a rare thing where you have an interviewer who is should be the expert, whatever, courageous enough to allow themselves to be vulnerable in an interview that they are conducting. And for that, I commend you deeply.
Thanks heaps. I really appreciate it. So guys, there you have it. Philip McKernan has been on the show. It's been one of the most incredible interviews that I've ever done on Unleash Your Inner Greatness. please follow Philip. Where are they best to find you, connect with you?
I'm on social media, pretty active. Like it's personal. It's all just one thing. It's not like a business page. And then philipmckernan.com or onelasttalk.com.
Awesome. And we'll link your books in the show notes. And if you've got any other events as well that you'd like me to link, let me know, Philip. But guys, there you have it. I'm so grateful for you coming on the show. And guys, you know what time it is. It's time to go out there and unleash your inner greatness.